Amazing answer, big brother! Hold on. Yeah, we're reading Crime and Punishment today. We finished the Metamorphosis some time ago, so we're gonna move up with the Kantos. Meaning, it's Rodion's turn next. I'd like to read The Stranger before Kanto 10 comes out, but I get the feeling Hong Lu has something to say about that. Did he Gregor his Samsa? He sure did, and made me fucking depressed in the process. Ooga booga. Alright, let's pull out the... the game. I am allegedly playing a video game. The nefarious Chinese literature. Oh, I could just do that. I mute Limbus from my computer when I'm not streaming it. I think Otis is dropping tonight, or is that later? Either way, here we are. The literature is not appearing below us. Oh, there it is. Woohoo! I'm gonna have to crop this differently. Or am I? Yeah, I think I am. Yeah, we're reading scans of a very old book. All I've heard of Hong Lu is that it's apparently a freakazoid. It's Chinese literature. What do you want? It's historical Chinese literature. What do you want? Ooh, that was crisp. Yeah, how this works is that we're basically gonna read in between doing dailies. And eventually Mirror Dungeon. In fact, let me take a look at the pages here. Should we proceed with the biographical note? Why the hell not? This is a 500-page long book. Let's do it. All right, let me put up the microphone to my mouth so you can like hear all my tongue flaps in real time. Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky was born at Moscow on October 30th, 1821, the son of a military surgeon. He was educated in his native city and at the School of Military Engineering at St. Petersburg, from which he graduated in 1843 with the grade of sub-lieutenant. The attraction of literature led him to give up the career that lay open to him, and he instead entered upon a long struggle with poverty. Cromer-type behavior? Sinclair. His first book, Poor Folks, 1846, though obviously influenced by Gogol, was recognized by the critics as the work of an original genius, and he became a regular contributor to a monthly magazine, Annals of the Country. He is said to have undertaken 10 new novels at once, and was certainly working at a terrific pace when a sudden halt was called. He had joined the circle of a political agitator, Petrochevsky, and had been taking part in its rather harmless discussions on political economy, when the suspicions of the police were aroused and he, with his brother and 30 comrades, was arrested in April 1849 and thrown into the fortresses of St. Peter and St. Paul in St. Petersburg, where he wrote his story, A Little Hero. On December 22nd, he and 21 others were conducted to the foot of a scaffold in the Simonovsky Square and told to prepare for death. But before the sentence was executed, as they stood in their shirts in the bitter December weather, it was announced that their penalty was commuted to exile in Siberia. You're keeping a count in at least one of your skill slots now? On Christmas Eve, he started on his journey, and the next 4 years were spent among convicts in a prison at Omsk. He has described his experiences there in his Memories of the House of the Dead, 1853, experiences which, though frightful in the extreme, seem to have strengthened rather than injured him in body and mind, though they may have embittered his temper. His imprisonment was followed by 3 years of compulsory military service, during the last of which he became an under-officer and married a widow, Madame Isaev. He now resumed his literary career, publishing The Injured and the Insulted in 1860. In 1862, he visited Western Europe, but seems to have made little use of his opportunities to study the civilization or national character of other peoples. He was a confirmed gambler, and his conduct at times reduced his wife and himself to an almost desperate situation. She died in 1863, and in the following year he lost his brother Michael, who had shared with him the management of a periodical. Left alone, he was unable to conduct the business affairs connected with it, and only the success of Crime and Punishment in 1866 rescued him from ruin. He had now reached the height of his powers, and the novels written after this period are generally regarded as showing an increasing lack of the proportion and restraint which had never been his to any great degree. The most important of the later works are The Idiot, 1869, The Possessed, 1873, The Adult, 1875, and The Brothers Karamazov, 1881. He married, as his second wife, his stenographer, Anna Grigorievna Svitkine, a girl who, though not highly educated, was capable and devoted, and through her energy his last years were passed in comfort and comparative prosperity. He issued periodically an author's notebook to which he contributed an amount of autobiographical matter, and through this and other writings in magazines he exercised a good deal of influence. He came finally to have a very high position in the popular regard, and his death in February 1881 brought forth an expression of public feeling such as St. Petersburg had seldom seen. Though Dostoevsky did not regard himself as a martyr in his Siberian exile, and indeed even seems to have regarded the suffering of that time in the light of explanation, though of what crime it is hard for a non-Russian to see, he bore the marks of the experience through the rest of his life. His face looked aged and sorrow-stricken, and he became bitter, silent, and suspicious. He was subject to epilepsy, and had strange hallucinations. Probably as a consequence of his long association with criminals, he had an intense interest in abnormal and perverted types, the psychology of which he analyzed with an uncanny subtlety. His books form a striking contrast to those of Turgenev in point of art, for they are diffuse, often poorly constructed and incoherent, and without charm of style. But in spite of these limitations, his power of rousing emotion, the grim intensity of his conceptions, and his command of the sources of fear and pity make him a very great writer. Crime and Punishment is his acknowledged masterpiece, and it displays some of his most characteristic ideas. Chief among them is that of expiation. The crime of Raskolnikov is not so much repented of as it is regarded as being cancelled by the voluntary submission to Siberian exile. Sonia, the pathetic girl of the streets through whom the hero learns the lesson of purification, represents the humility and devotion which are to Dostoevsky the saving virtues which are one day to save Russia. The most striking feature of the book to the Western reader, to whom the spiritual teaching is apt to seem strange and at times even perverse, is to be found in the analytical account of the states of mind of the half-crazed criminal, who cannot keep away from the very officials who are trying to get on his track, and who cannot refrain from discussing the crime he is trying to hide. As a study in morbid psychology, Crime and Punishment is one of the most amazingly convincing and terrifying books in all literature. Dostoevsky Vaza. Hello, I can't pronounce your name, but welcome to the channel. Alright, we're going to do a XP excavation right now, and then once that's done, we're going to read the next part, which is just going to be the criticisms and interpretations. Actually, maybe I should save that for after I've actually read the book. That's probably a good idea. I accidentally skipped forward quite a bit. No spoilers here. You're blood feeding for the new Ryoshu that you can now shard tomorrow? Interesting. I'm like not in so much of a rush to acquire her because I don't have the full roster yet. She is quite good. I did way too many pulls. I am someone who only saves for Walpurgis Nacht. I could, in theory, get her right now, but I'm not really super enthusiastic about it. Hi, Earl King. How you doing?
모든 것에 네 목숨은 아직 따로 쓸 곳이 있다. 너의 쓸모를 보소라. 주적들을 향하십시오. 혈염도 바로. 뭐야?
갈고리가 쉽게 들어간다. 어렵지 않게.
You honestly prefer the season IDs to some Walpurgis Nacht? Well, the Walpurgis Nacht ones are the only ones that are banner exclusive, so I'm cool with saving for that. Because if I'm gonna spark, I might as well rack up as many, like, things along the way.
방금 멋졌어. 나의 사랑의 힘이, 빛의 힘이 저 어둡고 아는 사람들을 뒤흔들었어. 이대로면 승리도 시간 문제겠지?
Don't get me wrong. Answer me, Heisho Pax. Is cooler than any Walpurgis Nacht ID Hongbu has right now.
마법 소녀들은 항상 유령난에
Of which
시달리고
there's only two, but you know.
너희만 괜찮다면 혹시 우리를 도와서 아니야. 그건 선택의 순간이 필요하니까 내가 정할 순 없겠네. 아쉽다. 그치?
저 행충들을 도려내라.
I've been drinking so much water today, it's kind of satisfying to like actually have a can of soda.
물러나라. 네 목숨은 아직 따로 쓸 곳이 있다. 적을 물어뜯고 너의 쓸모를 보여라.
I think the thing at the bottom there isn't going to be very helpful for what's going on right now, but you know, it's fine. To be honest, I have no initial impression of Dostoevsky's work. But if he was good enough for Norm Macdonald, he's definitely good enough for me. You're saving everything you're getting. You got enough shards and boxes to shard everything once it becomes shardable. Well, that's good.
자, 어느 쪽일지 잘 생각해보라고.
숨통 끊기.
저 해주를 도려내라. 말로 고작 이 정도 탕류의 허덕이.
적에게 치명상을 입혔군요. 관리자님은 당신을 생각하는 것보다 대단한 능력을 갖추고 좀 더 어설프고 제가 늘 말씀드렸죠. 저는 언제나 옳은 말을 한답니다.
마음 놓고 열어젖히고.
Oh, I didn't actually mean to use Crimson Spring there, but it's probably fine.
무상한 목숨. 지원했군.
The 10 damage, skill 3. It's not like the pulls I did were useless. I got 3 egos and 2 IDs, so the shower heat was an ID, but that's besides the point.
개체에게 일격을 가하는데 성공했습니다.
It's fine. It's just like when you have limited numbers of pulls, I prefer to use those on Walpurgis Knock because those are when like I'll be able to pull from the Walpurgis Knock banner and also the current seasonal stuff and everything in between. It's just a personal thing. It's something I picked up from playing Grand Blue Fantasy for a very long time.
불가 막아내지 않아요. 효율적인 대처로 개체를 꿰뚫었습니다. 이제 참고로 기계는 입에 발린 말싸움 쉽게 해결해 지지게.
And in the first place, I'm not the kind of person who like sees a character I must pull for the second they drop. I'm like, they'll be around later.
오늘도 정말 멋진 활약이었어. 내일도
Alright,
꼭
time for
불러주냐?
chapter 1.
세상이 평화로워지는 건 기쁜 거야.
오늘 부끄럽지 않았습니다. 의를 바로 세우는 데 일조하였으니
Nice how you can devote everything to
떳떳이
Walpipina.
살아갈 수 있겠군요.
Yeah, that's not a bad feeling. Anyway, a novel in 6 parts and an epilogue. Chapter 1. On an exceptionally hot evening early in July, a young man came out of the garret in which he lodged in S Place and walked slowly, as though in hesitation, towards K Bridge. He had successfully avoided meeting his landlady on the staircase. His garret was under the roof of a high, 5-storied house, and was more like a cupboard than a room. The landlady, who provided him with garrets, dinners, attendance, lived on the floor below, and every time he went out he was obliged to pass her kitchen, the door of which invariably stood open. And each time he passed, the young man had a sick, frightened feeling, which made him scowl and feel ashamed. He was hopelessly in debt to his landlady, and was afraid of meeting her. This was not because he was cowardly and abject, quite the contrary, but for some time past he had been in an overstrained, irritable condition, verging on hypochondria. He had become so completely absorbed in himself, and isolated from his fellows that he dreaded meeting not only his landlady, but anyone at all. He was crushed by poverty, but the anxieties of his position had of late ceased to weigh upon him. He had given up attending to matters of practical importance. He had lost all desire to do so. Nothing that any landlady could do had a real terror for him. But to be stopped on the stairs, to be forced to listen to her trivial, irrelevant gossip, to pestering demands for payment, threats and complaints, and to rack his brains for excuses, to prevaricate, to lie. No. Rather than that, he would creep down the stairs like a cat and slip out unseen. This evening, however, on coming out into the street, he became acutely aware of his fears. I want to attempt a thing like that, and am frightened by these trifles, he thought with an odd smile. Yes, all is in a man's hands, and he lets it all slip from cowardice. That's an axiom. It would be interesting to know what it is men are most afraid of. Taking a new step, Uttering a new word is what they fear most. But I am talking too much. It's because I chatter that I do nothing. Or perhaps it is that I chatter because I do nothing. I've learned to chatter this last month, lying for days together in my den thinking of Jack the Giant Killer. Why am I going there now? Am I capable of that? Is that serious? It is not serious at all. It's simply a fantasy to amuse myself. A plaything. Yes, maybe it is a plaything. The heat in the street was terrible. And the airlessness, the bustle and the plaster, scaffolding, bricks, and dust all about him, and that special Petersburg stench, so familiar to all who are unable to get out of town in summer, all worked painfully upon the young man's already overwrought nerves. The insufferable stench from the pothouses, which are particularly numerous in that part of town, and the drunken men whom he met continually, although it was a working day, completed the revolting misery of the picture. An expression of the profoundest disgust gleamed for a moment in the young man's refined face. He was, by the way, exceptionally handsome, above the average in height, slim, well-built, with beautiful dark eyes and dark brown hair. Soon he sank into deep thought, or more accurately speaking, into a complete blankness of mind. He walked along not observing what was about him, and not caring to observe it. From time to time, he would mutter something, from the habit of talking to himself to which he had just confessed. At these moments, he would become conscious that his ideas were sometimes at a tangle, and that he was very weak. For 2 days he had scarcely tasted food. He was so badly dressed that even a man accustomed to shabbiness would have been ashamed to be seen in the street in such rags. In that quarter of the town, however, scarcely any shortcoming in dress would have created surprise. Owing to the proximity of the Haymarket, the number of establishments of bad character, the preponderance of the trading and working-class population crowded in these streets and alleys in the heart of Petersburg, types so various were to be seen in the streets that no figure, however queer, would have caused surprise. But there was such accumulated bitterness and contempt in the young man's heart that, in spite of all the fastidiousness of youth, he minded his rags least of all in the street. It was a different matter when he met with acquaintances or with former fellow students, whom, indeed, he disliked meeting at any time. And yet, when a drunken man who, for some unknown reason, was being taken somewhere in a huge wagon dragged by a heavy dray horse, suddenly shouted at him as he drove past, "Hey there, German hatter!" bawling at the top of his voice and pointing at him. The young man stopped suddenly and clutched tremulously at his hat. It was a tall round hat from Zimmerman's, but completely worn out, rusty with age, all torn and bespattered, brimless, and bent on one side in a most unseemly fashion. Not shame, however, but quite another feeling akin to terror had overtaken him. "I knew it," he muttered in confusion. "I thought so. That's the worst of all. Why, a stupid thing like this, the most trivial detail might spoil the whole plan. Yes, my hat is too noticeable. It looks absurd, and that makes it noticeable. With my rags, I ought to wear a cap. Not any sort of old pancake, but not this grotesque thing. Nobody wears such a hat. It would be noticed a mile off. It would be remembered. What matters is that people would remember it, and that would give them a clue. For this business, one should be as little conspicuous as possible. Trifles. Trifles are what matter. Why, it's just such trifles that always ruin everything." He had not far to go. He knew indeed how many steps it was from the gate to the gate of his lodging house. Exactly 730. He had counted them once. I skipped several pages ahead. He had counted them once when he had been lost in dreams. At the time, he had put no faith in those dreams and was only tantalizing himself by their hideous but daring recklessness. Now, a month later, he had begun to look upon them differently, and in spite of the monologues in which he jeered at his own impotence and indecision, he had involuntarily come to regard this hideous dream as an exploit to be attempted. Although he still did not realize this himself. He was positively going now for a rehearsal of his project, and at every step his excitement grew more and more violent. With a sinking heart and a nervous tremor, he went up to a huge house which on one side looked onto the canal, and on the other into the street. This house was let out in tiny tenements, and was inhabited by working people of all kinds. Tailors, locksmiths, cooks, Germans of sorts, girls picking up a living as best they could, petty clerks, etc. There was a continual coming and going through the two gates and into the two courtyards of the house. 3 or 4 doorkeepers were employed on the building. The young man was very glad to meet none of them, and at once slipped unnoticed through the door on the right, and up the staircase. It was a back staircase, dark and narrow, but he was familiar with it already, and knew his way, and he liked all these surroundings. In such darkness, even the most inquisitive eyes were not to be dreaded. If I am so scared now, what would it be if it somehow came to pass that I were really going to do it? He could not help asking himself as he reached the 4th story. There his progress was barred by some porters who were engaged in moving furniture out of a flat. He knew that the flat had been occupied by a German clerk in the civil service and his family. This German was moving out then, and so the 4th floor on this staircase would be untenanted except by the old woman. That's a good thing anyway, he thought to himself, as he rang the bell of the old woman's flat. The bell gave a faint tinkle as though it were made of tin and not of copper. The little flats in such houses always have bells that ring like that. He had forgotten the note of that bell, and now its peculiar tinkle seemed to remind him of something, and to bring it clearly before him. He started. His nerves were terribly overstrained by now. In a little while, the door was opened by a tiny crack. The old woman eyed her visitor with evident distrust through the crack, and nothing could be seen but her little eyes glittering in the darkness. But, seeing a number of people on the landing, she grew bolder, and opened the door wide. The young man stepped into the dark entry, which was partitioned off from the tiny kitchen. The old woman stood facing him in silence and looking inquiringly at him. She was a diminutive, withered up old woman of 60, with sharp, malignant eyes and a sharp little nose. Her colorless, somewhat grizzled hair was thickly smeared with oil, and she wore no kerchief over it. Round her thin, long neck, which looked like a hen's leg, was knotted some sort of flannel rag, and, in spite of the heat, there hung flapping on her shoulders a mangy fur cape yellow with age. The old woman coughed and groaned at every instant. The young man must have looked at her with a rather peculiar expression, for a gleam of mistrust came into her eyes again. Raskolnikov, a student. I came here a month ago. The young man made haste to mutter, with a half-bow, remembering that he ought to be more polite. I remember, my good sir. I remember quite well your coming here, the old woman said distinctly, still keeping her inquiring eyes on his face. And here I am again, on the same errand. Raskolnikov continued, a little disconcerted and surprised at the old woman's mistrust. Perhaps she is always like that, though, only I did not notice it the other time, he thought with an uneasy feeling. The old woman paused, as though hesitating, then stepped on one side, and pointing to the door of the room, she said, letting her visitor pass in front of her. Step in, my good sir. The little room into which the young man walked, with yellow paper on the walls, geraniums and muslin curtains in the windows, was brightly lighted up at that moment by the setting sun. So the sun will shine like this then, too, flashed as it were by the chance through Raskolnikov's mind. It keeps doing this. and with a rapid glance, he scanned everything in the room, trying as far as possible to notice and remember its arrangement. But there was nothing special in the room. The furniture, all very old and of yellow wood, consisted... We're not at that level of intensity in music yet. Now let's just go back to this. Now, where were we? The furniture, all very old and of yellow wood, consisted of a sofa with a huge bent wooden back, an oval table in front of the sofa, a dressing table with a looking glass fixed on it between the windows, chairs along the walls, and 2 or 3 halfpenny prints in yellow frames, representing German damsels with birds in their hands. That was all. In the corner, a light was burning before a small icon. Everything was very clean. The floor and the furniture were brightly polished. Everything shone. Lisavetta's work, thought the young man. There was not a speck of dust to be seen in the whole flat. It's in the houses of spiteful old widows that one finds such cleanliness, Raskolnikov thought again, and he stole a curious glance at the cotton curtain over the door leading into another tiny room, in which stood the old woman's bed and a chest of drawers, and into which he had never looked before. These 2 rooms made up the whole flat. "What do you want?" the old woman said severely, coming into the room, and as before, standing in front of him so as to look him straight in the face. Sorry, I had to sneeze. "I've brought something to pawn here," and he drew out of his pocket an old-fashioned flat silver wrench. Let's try that again. "I brought something to pawn here," and he drew out of his pocket an old-fashioned flat silver watch, on the back of which was engraved a globe. The chain was of steel. "But the time is up for your last pledge. The month was up the day before yesterday. I will bring you the interest for another month. Wait a little." "But that's for me to do as I please, my good sir. To wait or to sell your pledge at once." "How much will you give me for the watch, Alyona Ivanova?" "Alyona Ivanovna. You come with such trifles, my good sir. It's scarcely worth anything. I gave you 2 rubles last time for your ring, and one could buy it quite new at a jeweler's for 1.5 rubles. Give me 4 rubles for it. I shall redeem it. It was my father's. I shall be getting some money soon." "1.5 rubles. An interest in advance, if you like." 1.5 rubles! "Please yourself," and the old woman handed him back the watch. The young man took it, and was so angry that he was on the point of going away, but checked himself at once, remembering that there was nowhere else he could go, and that he had had another object also in coming. "Hand it over," he said roughly. The old woman fumbled in her pocket for her keys, and disappeared behind the curtain into the other room. The young man, left standing alone in the middle of the room, listened inquisitively, thinking. He could hear her unlocking the chest of drawers. It must be the top drawer. So she carried the keys, he reflected. So she carried the keys in a pocket on the right, all in one bunch on a steel ring. And there's one key there, 3 times as big as all the others, with deep notches. That can't be the key of the chest of drawers. Then there must be some other chest or strongbox. That's worth knowing. Strongboxes always have keys like that. But how degrading it all is. The old woman came back. "Here, sir. As we say, 10 kopecks the ruble a month. So I must take 15 kopecks from the 1.5 rubles for the month in advance." But for the 2 rubles I lent you before, you owe me now 20 kopecks on the same reckoning in advance. That makes 35 kopecks altogether. So I must give you a ruble and 15 kopecks for the watch. Here it is. What? Only a ruble and 15 kopecks now? Just so. The young man did not dispute it and took the money. He looked at the old woman and was in no hurry to get away, as though there was still something he wanted to say or to do, but he did not himself quite know what. I may be bringing you something else in a day or two, Alyona Ivanovna. A valuable thing. Silver. A cigarette box. As soon as I get it back from a friend. He broke off in confusion. Well, we will talk about it then, sir. Goodbye. Are you always at home alone? Your sister is not here with you? He asked her as casually as possible as he went out into the passage. What business is that of yours, my good sir? Oh, nothing particular. I simply asked. You are too quick. Good day, Alyona Ivanovna. I'll get that right one day. Raskolnikov went out in complete confusion. This confusion became more and more intense. As he went down the stairs, he even stopped short 2 or 3 times as though suddenly struck by some thought. When he was in the street, he cried out, "Oh, God, how loathsome it all is! And can I possibly? No, it's nonsense. It's rubbish," he added resolutely. And how could such an atrocious thing come into my head? What filthy things my heart is capable of. Yes, filthy above all. Disgusting, loathsome, loathsome. And for a whole month I've been... But no words, no exclamations could express his agitation. The feeling of intense repulsion, which had begun to oppress and torture his heart while he was on his way to see the old woman, had by now reached such a pitch and had taken such a definite form that he did not know what to do with himself to escape from his wretchedness. He walked along the pavement like a drunken man, regardless of the passers-by, and jostling against them, and only came to his senses when he was in the next street. Looking round, he noticed that he was standing close to a tavern which was entered by steps leading from the pavement to the basement. At that instant, 2 drunken men came out at the door, and abusing and supporting one another, they mounted the steps. Without stopping to think, Raskolnikov went down the steps at once. Till that moment he had never been into a tavern, but now he felt giddy and was tormented by a burning thirst. He longed for a drink of cold beer, and attributed his sudden weakness to the want of food. He sat down at a sticky little table in a dark and dirty corner, ordered some beer, and eagerly drank off the first glassful. At once he felt easier, and his thoughts became clear. Oh, that's nonsense. And there's nothing to worry about, he said hopefully, and there's nothing in it at all to worry about. It's simply physical derangement. Just a glass of beer, a piece of dry bread. And in one moment the brain is stronger, the mind is clear, and the will is firm. Whew. How utterly petty it all is. But in spite of this scornful reflection, he was by now looking cheerful, as though he were suddenly set free from a terrible burden. And he gazed round in a friendly way at the people in the room. But even at that moment he had a dim foreboding that this happier frame of mind was also not normal. There were a few people at the time in the tavern. Besides the 2 drunken men he had met on the steps, a group consisting of about 5 men and a girl with a concertina had gone out at the same time. Their departure left the room quiet and rather empty. The persons still in the tavern were a man who appeared to be an artisan, drunk, but not extremely so, sitting before a pot of beer, and his companion, a huge, stout man with a grey beard, in a short, full-skirted coat. He was very drunk, and had dropped asleep on the bench. Every now and then, he began as though in his sleep, cracking his fingers, with his arms wide apart and the upper part of his body bounding about on the bench, while he hummed some meaningless refrain, trying to recall some such lines as these. His wife a year he fondly loved, his wife a year he fondly loved, or suddenly waking up again. Walking along the crowded row, he met the one he used to know. But no one shared his enjoyment. His silent companion looked with a positive hostility and mistrust at all these manifestations. There was another man in the room who looked somewhat like a retired government clerk. He was sitting apart, now and then sipping from his pot and looking round at the company. He too appeared to be in some agitation. And that's the end of chapter 1. It's nice to get to read a book again. I don't go out of my way to do that very often. It's nice giving myself the excuse to be literate. Well, in spite of my apparent literacy issues.
이번에 읽어줄 동화책은 이것으로.
Now we do our thread excavations.
돈키호테. 그래, 이번 전투를 잘 마치면 칭찬해주겠어. 그대는 어디까지 가고 있을지.
3월 앵화!
ダンテさんの作戦とても効果的でした。
Damn, son. Otis just got owned.
빈틈 투성이군. 스틸레터.
Oh, I hit the wrong target, didn't I? Never mind, we're good.
불확실한 것은 없네. 아르카나의 스프레드에 분명 강한 암시가 걸린 걸 거야. 조심해야 해.
I'm sure this is fine.
예측할 수 없게. 지키기 위해서.
Those fucking sound effects are really loud.
재밌네. 난 너희가 좀 더 어설플 거라고 생각했거든.
미래를 과거와 같이.
전술 시야 전개.
You guys like my choice of announcers? isn't burned. Okay.
포위망 구축.
이제 수에서 벗어났나?
자세가 모르겠네.
여섯째.
펜.
훌륭한 제압 성과를 낸 직원이 있군요. 효율적인
실생멸.
결과를 위해서 이쯤에서
오래
관리자님이
필수록 가치는
칭찬의 말을
떨어지는
건네줘도
법이지.
좋을 것 같네요. 물론 진심까지 담길 필요는 없습니다.
그대는 어디까지 가고 있을지.
We get to kill 3 of these guys before I go into the mirror dungeon.
이제 완료.
Oh, did Yisung already get Furioso? That's crazy. One, two,
삼코.
three.
그래도 관리자보단 낫네. 너희는 모르겠지만 처음엔 이것보다 훨씬 끔찍했고.
살고자 하는 모든 것들과 함께. 무덤.
I could have played that better, but honestly, I don't
자세가
care.
모르겠네.
여기선 이런 공격이 잘 먹히는군요.
태어난 곳은
We're not tryhardinger dailies, man.
지리멸.
옳다. 작업 결과는
꿈이란 건
좋음인가?
이런 사소한 일에도 슬며시 따라오나
관리자.
봐요.
곧알
모두가
후가
노력한
탈출할
덕분에
거다.
업무가 일찍 끝날 것 같은 지금처럼 말이에요. 그대는 어디까지 가고 있을지.
지키기 위해서
We'll save Furioso for the next
약점을
moth.
공략해서 제압하는 건 다들 능숙하네.
탕.
자세가 모르겠네. 빈틈투성이군.
자가당차기로다.
흔치
오래
않은
필수록
기회니
가치는
이 틈에
떨어지는
승기를
법이지.
붙이자꾸나.
Excellent, it's Furiosoing time.
그대는 어디 격정의 마음을 모방하겠어. 자연 종료.
적에게 치명상을 입혔군요. 관리자님은 당신이 생각하는
살고자 하는
것보다
모든
대단한
것들과
능력을 가지고 있다고 제가 늘 말씀드렸죠.
무덤으로 돌아가라.
저는
자세가
언제라도
모르겠네.
잘했네. 옳은 말만 한답니다. 그렇기만 해.
대행 완료.
Creature. I mean, you know what? I probably could use Solid Lament. Whatever.
사물.
뜻을 해금하겠네.
딸아이도 이 상처를 기억하고 있으면
굿,
좋겠구려.
온, 올. 하지만 슬슬 물리는군.
Alright, we're gonna read
근처에
chapter 2, and then we're gonna enter the mirror dungeon.
거를 파는 곳 있나? 이건. 그럼 모처럼 괜찮은 예술을 보나 했더니 벌써 목 애를 전부 채웠군. 방지.
점심시간.
Aside from the obvious, who would I dispense right now? Probably her. I could just get you, but do I really care? Would it be worth running fucking Rose Spanner Rhodia over that of the Spare? Wait a fucking second. Rose Spanner Greg doesn't even get... Oh. Because I don't have the skill 3 yet. I'm thinking of doing some weird, like, keyword shit with the comp that I run for Mirror Dungeons right now, because it's... Goody. Because the comp I was running was, not this, it was, this. Pointless Isang makes it so that you can just run fucking whatever, in terms of, keywords, and even if he doesn't necessarily, like, benefit from all the keyword eagles like he used to, he still applies enough potency and count that the ego gifts that do the same things that like apply count and potency lets you be a bit more flexible with who you want to run. But the general idea of this team composition is that it's charge and bleed, you know. With Rhodia and Meursault providing some syncing application. Technically, Yisang does too, but these two are more actually focused on that. Night Owl's Gregor is there because he could do hemorrhage, but if I'm running pointless Yisang, it's kind of like, what would I rather run there? Consistently, the highest DPSs are like, obviously, Ring Nurse Father Honglu, then it's Faust, then it's Yisang, which is kind of dire considering what we're dealing with. But it's also really nice running Honglu because he just gets free attack weight, pretty much. Oh, and also, yeah, Rabbit Heathcliff. I've been using him instead of this creature. There's probably better support choices, but run into anything dire enough for that to matter at this point. And I play this game casually enough to not care. But anyway, we need to get back to reading. In fact, why don't I move this thingy? Okay, cool. Let's do that. Raskolnikov was not used to crowds, and, as we said before, he avoided society of every sort, more especially of late. But now, all at once, he felt a desire to be with other people. Something new seemed to be taking place within him, and with it he felt a sort of thirst for company. He was so weary after a whole month of concentrated wretchedness and gloomy excitement that he longed to rest, if only for a moment, in some other world, whatever it might be, and, in spite of the filthiness of the surroundings, he was glad now to stay in the tavern. The master of the establishment was in another room, but he frequently came down some steps into the main room, his jaunty, tarred boots with red turnover tops coming into view each time before the rest of his person. He wore a full coat and a horribly greasy black satin waistcoat, with no cravat, and his whole face seemed smeared with oil like an iron lock. At the counter stood a boy of about 14, and there was another boy, somewhat younger, who handed whatever was wanted. On the counter lay some sliced cucumber, some pieces of dried black bread, and some fish, chopped up and small, all smelling very bad. It was insufferably close, and so heavy with the fumes of spirits that 5 minutes in such an atmosphere might well make a man drunk. There are chance meetings with strangers that interest us from the first moment before a word is spoken. Such was the impression made on Raskolnikov by the person sitting a little distance from him, who looked like a retired clerk. The young man often recalled his impression afterwards, and even ascribed it to presentiment. He looked repeatedly at the clerk, partly no doubt because the latter was staring persistently at him, obviously anxious to enter into conversation. At the other persons in the room, including the tavern keeper, the clerk looked as though he were used to their company, and weary of it, showing a shade of condescending contempt. for them as persons of station and culture inferior to his own, with whom it would be useless for him to converse. He was a man over 50, bald and grizzled, of medium height, and stoutly built. His face, bloated from continual drinking, was of a yellow, even greenish tinge, with swollen eyelids out of which keen reddish eyes gleamed like little chinks. But there was something very strange in him. There was a light in his eyes as though of intense feeling. Perhaps there were even thought and intelligence. But at the same time, there was a gleam of something like madness. He was wearing an old and hopelessly ragged black dress coat, with all its buttons missing except one. And that one he had buttoned, evidently clinging to the last trace of respectability. A crumpled shirt front, covered with spots and stains, protruded from his canvas waistcoat. Like a clerk, he wore no beard, nor moustache, but he had been so long unshaven that his chin looked like a stiff grayish brush. And there was something respectable and like an official about his manner, too. But he was restless. He ruffled up his hair and from time to time let his head drop into his hands, dejectedly resting his ragged elbows on the stained and sticky table. At last he looked straight at Raskolnikov and said loudly and resolutely, "May I venture, honored sir, to engage you in polite conversation? For as much as, though your exterior would not command respect, my experience admonishes me that you are a man of education and not accustomed to drinking. I have always respected education when in conjunction with genuine sentiment, and I am besides a titular counselor in rank. Marmeladov, such is my name, titular counselor. I make bold to inquire, have you been in the service?" "No, I am studying," answered the young man, and somewhat surprised at the grandiloquent style of the speaker, and also at being so directly addressed. In spite of the momentary desire he had just been feeling for company of any sort, on being actually spoken to, he felt immediately his habitual irritable and uneasy aversion for any stranger who approached him or attempted to approach him. "A student, then, or formerly a student?" cried the clerk. "Just what I thought. I am a man of experience, immense experience, sir," and he tapped his forehead with his fingers in self-approval. "You've been a student, or have attended some learned institution. But allow me." He got up, staggered, took up his jug and his glass, and sat down beside the young man, facing him a little sideways. He was drunk, but spoke fluently and boldly, only occasionally losing the thread of his sentences and drawling his words. He pounced upon Raskolnikov as greedily as though he too had not spoken to a soul for a month. "Honored sir," he began with almost solemnity, "poverty is not a vice, that's a true saying. Yet I know too that drunkenness is not a virtue, and that's even truer. But beggary, honored sir, beggary is a vice. In poverty you may still retain your innate nobility of soul, but in beggary, never, no one. For beggary a man is not chased out of human society with a stick. He is swept out with a broom so as to make it as humiliating as possible. And quite right, too, for as much as in beggary I am ready to be the first to humiliate myself. Hence the pothouse. Honored sir, a month ago, Mr. Mr. Lebezianikov gave my wife a beating, and my wife is a very different matter from me. Do you understand? Allow me to ask you another question out of simple curiosity. Have you ever spent a night on a hay barge on the Neva?" "No, I have not happened to," answered Raskolnikov. "What do you mean?" "Well, I've just come from one, and it's the 5th night I've slept, so..." He filled his glass, emptied it, and paused. Bits of hay were in fact clinging to his clothes and sticking to his hair. It seemed quite probable even, that he had not undressed or washed for the last 5 days. His hands, particularly, were filthy. They were fat and red with black nails. His conversation seemed to excite a general, though languid, interest. The boys at the counter fell to sniggering. The innkeeper came down from the upper room, apparently on purpose to listen to the funny fellow, and sat down a little distance, yawning lazily, but with dignity. Evidently, Marmeladov was a familiar figure here, and he had most likely acquired his weakness for high-flown speeches from the habit of frequently entering into conversation with strangers of all sorts in the tavern. This habit develops into a necessity in some drunkards, and especially in those who are looked after sharply and kept in order at home. Hence, in the company of other drinkers, they try to justify themselves and, even if possible, obtain consideration. "Funny fellow," pronounced the innkeeper. "And why don't you work? Why aren't you at your duty if you are in the service?" "Why am I not at my duty, honored sir?" Marmeladov went on, addressing himself exclusively to Raskolnikov as though it had been he who put that question to him. "Why am I not at my duty? Does not my heart ache to think what a useless worm I am? A month ago, when Mr. Lebeziatnikov... I'm going to get that right one day. Lebeziatnikov beat my wife with his own hands, and I lay drunk. Didn't I suffer? Excuse me, young man. Has it ever happened to you... Well, to petition hopelessly for a loan?" "Yes, it has. But what do you mean by hopelessly?" "Hopelessly in the fullest sense, when you know beforehand that you will get nothing by it. You know, for instance, beforehand with positive certainty that this man, this most reputable and exemplary citizen, will on no consideration give you money. And indeed, I ask you, why should he? For he knows, of course, that I shan't pay it back. For compassion? But Mr. Lebeziatnikov, who keeps up with modern ideas, explained the other day that compassion is forbidden nowadays by science itself, and that's what is done now in England, where there is political economy. Why, I ask you, should he give it to me? And yet, though I know beforehand that he won't, I set off to him and... Why do you go? Put in Raskolnikov. Well, when one has no one, nowhere else one can go. For every man must have somewhere to go, since there are times when one absolutely must go somewhere. When my own daughter first went out with a yellow ticket, then I had to go, for my daughter has a yellow passport," he added in parentheses, looking with a certain uneasiness at the young man. "No matter, sir, no matter," he went on hurriedly, and with apparent composure when both of the boys at the counter guffawed and even the innkeeper smiled. "No matter, I am not confounded by the wagging of their heads, for everyone knows everything about it already, and all that is secret is made open. And I accept it all not with contempt, but with humility. So be it. So be it. Behold the man. Excuse me, young man, can you... No, to put it more strongly and more distinctly, not can you, but dare you, looking upon me, assert that I am not a pig?" The young man did not answer a word. "Well," the orator began again with stolidly and with even increased dignity, after waiting for the laughter in the room to subside. "Well, so be it. I am a pig, but she is a lady. I have the semblance of a beast, but Katerina Ivanovna, my spouse, is a person of education and an officer's daughter. Granted, I am a scoundrel, but she is a woman of noble heart, full of sentiments, refined by education. And yet, oh, if only she felt for me, honored sir, you know every man ought to have at least one place where people feel for him. But Katerina Ivanovna, though she is magnanimous, she is unjust. And yet, although I realize that when she pulls my hair, she only does it out of pity. For I repeat, without being ashamed, she pulls my hair, young man. he declared with redoubled dignity, hearing the sniggering again. But, my God, if she would but once... But no. It's all in vain, and it's no use talking. For more than once my wish did come true, and more than once she has felt for me, but such is my fate, and I am a beast by nature. Rather, assented the innkeeper, yawning. Marmeladov struck his fist resolutely on the table. Such is my fate. Do you know, sir, I have sold her very stockings for drink. Not her shoes, that would be more or less in the order of things, but her stockings I have sold for drink. Her mohair shawl I sold for drink, a present to her long ago, her own property, not mine. And we live in a cold room, and she caught cold this winter, and has been coughing and spitting blood too. We have 3 little children, and Katerina Ivanovna is at work from morning till night. She is scrubbing and cleaning and washing the children, for she's been used to cleanliness from a child. But her chest is weak, and she has a tendency to consumption, and I feel it. Do you suppose I don't feel it? And the more I drink, the more I feel it. That's why I drink too. I try to find sympathy and feeling in drink. I drink so that I may suffer twice as much. And as though in despair, he laid his head down on the table. Young man, he went on, raising his head again. In your face, I seem to read some trouble of mind. When you came in, I read it, and that was why I addressed you at once. For in unfolding to you the story of my life, I do not wish to make myself a laughingstock before these idle listeners, who indeed know all about it already, but I am looking for a man of feeling and education. Know then that my wife was educated in a high-class school for the daughters of noblemen, and on leaving, she danced the shawl dance before the governor and other personages, for which she was presented with a gold medal and a certificate of merit. The medal? Well, the medal was, of course, gold. The medal of course, was sold long ago. But the certificate of merit is in her trunk still, and not long ago she showed it to our landlady. And although she is most continually on bad terms with the landlady, yet she wanted to tell someone or other of her past honors and of the happy days that are gone. I don't condemn her for it. I don't blame her, for the one thing left is her recollection of the past, and all the rest is dust and ashes. Yes, she is a lady of spirit, proud and determined. She scrubs the floors herself, and has nothing but black bread to eat, but won't allow herself to be treated with disrespect. That's why she would not overlook Mr. Lebesnikov's rudeness to her. And so when he gave her a beating for it, she took to her bed, more from the hurt to her feelings than from the blows. She was a widow when I married her, with 3 children, one smaller than the other. She married her first husband, an infantry officer, for love, and ran away with him from her father's house. She was exceedingly fond of her husband, but he gave way to cards, got into trouble, and with that he died. He used to beat her at the end. And although she paid him back, of which I have authentic documentary evidence, to this day she speaks of him with tears. And she throws him up at me. And I am glad that, though only in imagination, she should think of herself as having once been happy. And she was left at his death with 3 children in a wild and remote district where I happened to be at the time. And she was left in such hopeless poverty that, although I have seen many ups and downs of all sorts, I don't feel equal to describing it even. Her relations had all thrown her off. And she was proud, too, excessively proud. And then, honored sir, and then I, being at the time a widower, with a daughter of 14 left to me by my first wife, offered her my hand, for I could not bear the sight of such suffering. You can judge the extremity of her calamities that she, a woman of education and culture and distinguished family, should have consented to be my wife. But she did! weeping and sobbing and wringing her hands, she married me. For she had nowhere to go, nowhere to turn. Do you understand, sir? Do you understand what it means when you have absolutely nowhere to turn? No. That you don't understand yet. And for a whole year, I performed my duties conscientiously and faithfully, and did not touch this. He tapped the jug with his finger. For I have feelings. But even so, I could not please her. And then I lost my place too. And that through no fault of mine, but through changes in the office. And then I did touch it. It will be a year and a half ago soon since we found ourselves at last, after many wanderings and numerous calamities, in this magnificent capital adorned with innumerable monuments. Here too I obtained a situation. I obtained it and I lost it again. Do you understand? This time it was through my own fault I lost it, for my weakness had come out. We have now part of a room at Amalia Ivanovna Lipeveshel's. I think that's pronounced Lipveshel's, but whatever. And what we live upon and what we pay our rent with, I could not say. There are a lot of people living there besides ourselves. Dirt and disorder, a perfect bedlam. Yes. And meanwhile, my daughter by my first wife has grown up. And what my daughter has had to put up with from her stepmother whilst she was growing up, I won't speak of. For though Katerina Ivanovna is full of generous feelings, she is a spirited lady. Irritable and short-tempered. Yes, but it's no use going over that. Sonia, as you may well fancy, has had no education. I did make an effort 4 years ago to give her a course of geography and universal history, but as I was not very well up in those subjects myself, and we had no suitable books, and what books we had, anyway, we have not even those now, so all our instruction came to an end. We stopped at Cyrus of Persia. Since she has attained years of maturity, she has read other books of romantic tendency. And, of late, she has read with great interest the book she got through Mr. Lebesniatikov. Lou's Physiology. Do you know it? And even recounted extracts from it to us. And that's the whole of her education. And now may I venture to address you, honored sir, on my own account with a private question. Do you suppose that a respectable poor girl can earn much by honest work? Not 15 farthings a day can she earn, if she is respectable, and has no special talent that without putting her work down for an instant. And what's more, Ivan Ivanich Klopstock, the civil councillor, have you heard of him? Has not to this day paid her for the half-dozen linen shirts she made him, and drove her roughly away, stamping and reviling her, on the pretext that the shirt collars were not made like the pattern, and were put in askew. And there are the little ones hungry, and Katerina Ivanovna walking up and down and wringing her hands, her cheeks flushed red, as they always are in that disease. Here you live with us, said she. You eat and drink and are kept warm, and you do nothing to help. And much she gets to eat and drink when there is not a crust for the little ones for 3 days. I was lying at the time. Well, what of it? I was lying drunk, and I heard my Sonia speaking. She is a gentle creature with a soft little voice, fair hair, and such a pale, thin little face. She said, Katerina Ivanovna, am I really to do a thing like that? And Darya Fansovna, a woman of evil character, and very well known to the police, had 2 or 3 times tried to get her through at the landlady. And why not? Said Katerina Ivanovna with a jeer. You are something mighty precious to be so careful of. But don't blame her. Don't blame her, honored sir. Don't blame her. She was not herself when she spoke, but driven to distraction by her illness and the crying of the hungry children. And it was said more to wound her than anything else. For that's Katerina Ivanovna's character. And when children cry, even from hunger, she falls to beating them at once. At 6 o'clock, I saw Sonia get up, put on her kerchief and her cape, and go out of the room, and about 9 o'clock she came back. She walked straight up to Katerina Ivanovna, and she laid 30 rubles on the table before her in silence. She did not utter a word. She did not even look at her. She simply picked up our big green drap de dame shawl. We have a shawl made up of drap de dame. Put it over her head and face, and lay down on the bed with her face to the wall. Only her little shoulders and her body kept shuddering. And I went on lying there just as before. And then I saw, young man, I saw Katerina Ivanovna in the same silence go up to Sonia's little bed. She was on her knees all the evening kissing Sonia's feet and would not get up. And then they both fell asleep in each other's arms. Together. Together. Yes. And I lay drunk. Marmeladov stopped short, as though his voice had failed him. Then he hurriedly filled his glass, drank, and cleared his throat. Since then, sir, he went on after a brief pause, since then, owing to an unfortunate occurrence and through information given by evil-intentioned persons, in all which Darya Frantsovna took a leading part on the pretext that she had been treated with want of respect. Since then, my daughter, Sofia Semyonovna, has been forced to take a yellow ticket, and owing to that, she is unable to go on living with us. For our landlady, Amalia Ivanovna, would not hear of it, though she had backed up Darya Frantsovna before. And Mr. Lebesnietnikov's too. All the trouble between him and Katerina Ivanovna was on Sonia's account. At first he was making up to Sonia himself, and then all of a sudden he stood on his dignity. "How," said he, "can a highly educated man like me live in the same rooms with a girl like that?" And Katerina Ivanovna would not let it pass. She stood up for her. And so that's how it happened. And Sonia comes to us now, mostly after dark. She comforts Katerina Ivanovna and gives her all she can. She has a room at the Kapernamovs, the tailors. She lodges with them. Kapernamov is a lame man with a cleft palate, and all his numerous family have cleft palates too. And his wife, too, has a cleft palate. They all live in one room, but Sonia has her own partitioned off. Yes. Very poor people and all with cleft palates. Yes. Then I got up in the morning, put on my rags, lifted up my hands to heaven, and set off to His Excellency, Ivan Afasnievich. His Excellency Ivan Afasnievich. Do you know him? No. No? Well then, it's a man of God you don't know. He is wax. Wax before the face of the Lord, even as wax melteth. His eyes were dim when he heard my story. Marmeladov, once already you would have deceived my expectations. I'll take you once more on my own responsibility. That's what he said. Remember, he said, and now you can go. I kissed the dust at his feet. In thought only, for in reality he would not have allowed me to do it, being a statesman and a man of modern political and enlightened ideas. I returned home, and when I announced that I'd been taken back into the service and should receive a salary, heavens, what a to-do there was. Marmeladov stopped again in violent excitement. At a moment, a whole party of revelers, already drunk, came in from the street, and the sounds of a hired concertina and the cracked piping voice of a child of 7 singing the Hamlet were heard in the entry. The room was filled with noise. The tavern keeper and the boys were busy with the newcomers. Marmeladov paying no attention to the new arrivals, continued his story. He appeared by now to be extremely weak, but as he became more and more drunk, he became more and more talkative. The recollection of his recent success in getting the situation seemed to revive him, and was positively reflected in a sort of radiance on his face. Raskolnikov listened attentively. Attentively. Pardon me. That was 5 weeks ago, sir. Yes. As soon as Katerina Ivanovna and Sonia heard mercy on us, it was as though I stepped into the kingdom of heaven. It used to be. You could lie like a beast. Nothing but abuse. Now they were walking on tiptoe, hushing the children. Semyon Zaharovich is tired with his work at the office. He is resting. Shh. They made me coffee before I went to work and boiled cream for me. They began to get real cream for me. Do you hear that? And how they managed to get together the money for a decent outfit. 11 rubles, 50 kopecks. I can't guess. Boots, cotton shirt fronts, most magnificent. A uniform. They got up all in splendid style for 11 rubles and a half. The first morning I came back from the office, I found Katerina Ivanovna had cooked 2 courses for dinner. Soup and salt meat with horseradish, which we had never dreamed of till then. She has not any dresses. None at all, but she got herself up as though she was going on a visit. And not that she had anything to do it with. She smartened herself up with nothing at all. She'd done her hair nicely, put on a clean collar of some sort, cuffs, and there she was. Ah! Hi everyone, we're reading literature right now. How was your stream? I know, Seiko, you were doing Armored Core 2. How's the book? 1800s Russia. Everyone is goddamn miserable. I believe the punchline to this story is that his daughter started prostituting herself for him, and he went back to immediately being a drunkard. This isn't the main character, for the record. Where are we? She was quite a different person. She was younger and better looking. Sonia, my little darling, had only helped with money for the time, she said. It won't do for me to come and see you too often. After dark, maybe when no one can see. Do you hear? Do you hear? I had laid down for a nap after dinner, and what do you think? Though Katerina Ivanovna had quarreled to the last degree with our landlady, Amalia Ivanovna, only a week before, she could not resist then asking her in to coffee. For 2 hours they were sitting, whispering together. Semyon Zaharovich is in the service again now, and receiving a salary, says she, and he went himself to His Excellency, and His Excellency himself came out to him, made all the others wait, and led Semyon Zaharovich by the hand before everybody into his study. Do you hear? Do you hear? To be sure, says he. Semyon Zaharovich, remembering your past services, says he, and in spite of your and in spite of your propensity to that foolish weakness, since you promised now, and since moreover we've got on badly without you. Do you hear? Do you hear? And so, says he, I relied now on your word as a gentleman. And all that, let me tell you, she has simply made up for herself. And not simply out of wantonness, for the sake of bragging. No, she believes law herself. And she amuses herself with her own fancies. Upon my word, she does. And I don't blame her for it. No, I don't blame her. 6 days ago, when I brought her my first earnings in full, 23 rubles, 40 kopecks altogether, she called me her puppet. Puppet, said she, my little puppet. And when we were by ourselves, you understand? You would not think me a beauty. You would not think much of me as a husband, would you? Well, she pinched my cheek. My little puppet, said she. Marmeladov broke off, tried to smile, but suddenly his chin began to twitch. He controlled himself, however. The tavern, the degraded appearance of the man, the 5 nights at Freddy's in the hay barge, and the pot of spirits, and yet this poignant love for his wife and children bewildered his listener. Raskolnikov, this is the main protagonist for everyone coming in, listened intently, but with a sick sensation. He felt vexed that he had come here. Honored sir, cried Marmeladov, recovering himself. Oh, sir, perhaps all this seems a laughing matter to you, as it does to others. And perhaps I am only worrying you with the stupidity of all the trivial details of my home life. But it is not a laughing matter for me, for I can feel it all. And the whole of that heavenly day of my life, and the whole of that evening I passed in fleeting dreams of how I would arrange it all, and how I would dress all the children, and how I should give her rest, and how I should rescue my own daughter from dishonor, and restore her to the bosom of her family, and a great deal more. Quite excusable, sir. Well then, sir. Marmeladov suddenly gave a sort of start, raised his head, and gazed intently at his listener. Well, on the very next day after all those dreams, that is to say, exactly 5 days ago, in the evening, by a cunning trick like a thief in the night, I stole from Katerina Ivanovna the key of her box, took out what was left of my earnings. How much it was I have forgotten. And now look at me, all of you. It's the 5th day since I left home, and they're looking for me there, and it's the end of my employment, and my uniform is lying in a tavern on the Egyptian bridge. I exchanged it for the garments I have on, and it's the end of everything. Marmeladov struck his forehead with his fist, clenched his teeth, closed his eyes, and leaned heavily with his elbow on the table. But a minute later, his face suddenly changed, and with a certain assumed slyness, an affection of bravado, he glanced at Raskolnikov, laughed, and said, "This morning I went to see Sonia. I went to ask her for a pick-me-up." "You don't say she gave it to you," cried one of the newcomers. He shouted the words and went out into a guffaw. "This very quart was bought with her money," Marmeladov declared, addressing himself exclusively to Raskolnikov. 30 kopecks she gave me with her own hands. Her last, all she had, as I saw. She said nothing. She only looked up at me without a word. Not on earth, but up yonder. They grieve over men. They weep, but they don't blame them. They don't blame them. But it hurts more. It hurts more when they don't blame. 30 kopecks, yes? And maybe she needs them now, eh? What do you think, my dear sir? For now she's got to keep up her appearance. It costs money, that smartness. That special smartness, you know? Do you understand? And there's pomatum too, you see. She must have things. Petticoats, starched ones, shoes too. Real jaunty ones to show off her foot when she has to step over a puddle. Do you understand, sir? Do you understand what all that smartness means? And here I, her own father, here I took 30 kopecks of that money for a drink, and I am drinking it. And I have already drunk it. Come, who will have pity on a man like me, eh? Are you sorry for me, sir? Or not? Tell me, sir. Are you sorry or not? He would have filled his glass, but there was no drink left. The pot was empty. What are you to be pitied for? Shouted the tavern keeper, who was again near them. Shouts of laughter and even oaths followed. The laughter and the oaths came from those who were listening and also from those who had heard nothing, but were simply looking at the figure of the discharged government clerk. To be pitied! Why am I to be pitied? Marmeladov suddenly declaimed, standing up with his arm outstretched as though he had been only waiting for that question. Why am I to be pitied, you say? Yes, There's nothing to pity me for. I ought to be crucified on a cross, not pitied. Crucify me, O judge. Crucify me, but pity me. And then I will go of myself to be crucified, for it's not merrymaking I seek, but tears and tribulation. Do you suppose, you, that cell, that this pint of yours has been sweet to me? It was tribulation I sought at the bottom of it. Tears and tribulation. And I've found it. And I have tasted it. But he will pity us who has had pity on all men, who has understood all men and all things. He is the one. He too is the judge. He will come in that day and he will ask, where is the daughter who gave herself for her cross, consumptive stepmother, and for the little children of another? Where is the daughter who had pity upon the filthy drunkard, her earthly father, undismayed by his beastliness? And he will say, come to me. I have already forgiven thee once. I have forgiven thee once. Thy sins, which are many, are forgiven thee, for thou hast loved much. And he will forgive my Sonia. He will forgive. I know it. I felt it in my heart when I was with her just now. And he will judge and will forgive all, the good and the evil, the wise and the meek. And when he has done with all of them, then he will summon us. You too come forth, he will say. Come forth, ye drunkards, come forth, ye weak ones, come forth, ye children of shame. And we shall all come forth without shame, and shall stand before him. And he will say unto us, ye are swine, made in the image of the beast, and with his mark. Become ye also. And the wise ones and those of understanding will say, O Lord, why dost thou receive these men? And he will say, this is why I receive them, O ye wise. This is why I receive them, O ye of understanding, that not one of them believed himself to be worthy of this. And he will hold out his hands to us, and we shall fall down before him, and we shall weep, and we shall understand all things. Then we shall understand all, and all will understand. Katerina Ivanovna even, she will understand. Lord, thy kingdom come. And he sank down on the bench exhausted and helpless, looking at no one, apparently oblivious of his surroundings and plunged in deep thought. His words had created a certain impression. There was a moment of silence. But soon, laughter and oaths were heard again. That's his notion. Talked himself silly. A fine clerk he is. And so on, and so on. Let us go, sir, said Marmeladov all at once, raising his head and addressing Raskolnikov. Come along with me. Kozel's house, looking into the yard. I'm going to Katerina Ivanovna. Time I did. Taking a drink real quick. Raskolnikov had for some time been wanting to go, and he had meant to help him. Marmeladov was much unsteadier on his legs than in his speech, and leaned heavily on the young man. They had 200 or 300 paces to go. The drunken man was more and more overcome by dismay and confusion as they drew nearer the house. It's not Katerina Ivanovna I am afraid of now, he muttered in agitation. And that she will begin pulling my hair. What does my hair matter? Bother my hair. That's what I say. Indeed, it will be better if she does begin pulling on it. That's not what I am afraid of. It's her eyes I am afraid of. Yes, her eyes. The red on her cheeks, too, frightens me. And her breathing, too. Have you noticed how people in that disease breathe when they are excited? I am frightened of the children's crying, too, or if Sonia has not taken them food. I don't know what's happened. I don't know. But blows I am not afraid of. No, sir, that such blows are not a pain to me, but even an enjoyment. In fact, I can't get on without it. It's better so. Let her strike me, that it relieves her heart. It's better so. There is the house of Kozel, the cabinet maker. A German, well-to-do. Lead the way. They went in from the yard and up to the 4th story. The staircase got darker and darker as they went up. It was nearly 11 o'clock, and although in summer in Petersburg there is no real night, yet it was quite dark at the top of the stairs. A grimy little door at the very top of the stairs stood ajar. A very poor-looking room, about 10 paces long, was lighted up by a candle end. The whole of it was visible from the entrance. It was all in disorder, littered up with rags of all sorts, especially children's garments. Across from the furthest corner was stretched a ragged sheet. Behind it, probably, was the bed. There was nothing in the room except 2 chairs and a sofa covered with American leather, full of holes, before which stood an old deal kitchen table, unpainted and uncovered. At the edge of the table stood a smoldering tallow candle in an iron candlestick. It appears that the family had a room to themselves, not part of a room, but their room was practically a passage. The door leading to the other rooms, or rather cupboards, into which Amalia Lipfessel's flat had divided stood half open. And there was shouting, uproar, and laughter within. People seemed to be playing cards and drinking tea there. Words of the most unceremonious kind flew out from time to time. Raskolnikov recognized Katerina Ivanovna at once. She was a rather tall, slim, and graceful woman, terribly emaciated, with magnificent dark brown hair, and with a hectic flush in her cheeks. She was pacing up and down in her little room, pressing her hands against her chest. Her lips were parched, and her breathing came in nervous, broken gasps. Her eyes glittered as in fever, and looked about with a harsh, immovable stare. And that consumptive and excited face, with the last flickering light of the candle end playing upon it, made a sickening impression. She seemed to Raskolnikov about 30 years old, and was certainly a strange wife for Marmeladov. She had not heard them and did not notice them coming in. She seemed to be lost in thought, hearing and seeing nothing. The room was close, but she had not opened the window. A stench rose from the staircase. A stench rose from the staircase, but the door to the stairs was not closed. From the inner rooms, clouds of tobacco smoke floated in. She kept coughing, but did not close the door. The youngest child, a girl of 6, was asleep, sitting curled up on the floor with her head on the sofa. A boy a year older stood crying and shaking in the corner. Probably he had just had a beating. Beside him stood a girl of 9 years old, tall and thin, wearing a thin and ragged chemise with a ancient cashmere pelisse flowing over her bare shoulders, long outgrown and barely reaching her knees. Her arm, as thin as a stick, was round her brother's neck. She was trying to comfort him, whispering something to him, and doing all she could to keep him from whimpering again. At the same time, her large dark eyes, which looked larger still from the thinness of her frightened face, were watching her mother with alarm. Marmeladov did not enter the door, but dropped on his knees in the very doorway, pushing Raskolnikov in front of him. The woman, seeing a stranger, stopped indifferently facing him, coming to herself for a moment and apparently wondering what he had come for. But evidently she decided that he was going into the next room, as he had to pass through hers to get there. Taking no further notice of him, she walked towards the outer door to close it and uttered a sudden scream on seeing her husband on his knees in the doorway. Ah! Sorry to scare you. She cried out in a frenzy. He has come back! The criminal! The monster! And where is the money? What's in your pocket? Show me. And your clothes are all different. Where are your clothes? Where's the money? Speak! And she fell to searching him. Marmeladov submissively and obediently held up both arms to facilitate the search. Not a farthing was there. Where is the money? She cried. Mercy on us, can he have drunk it all? There were 12 silver rubles left in that chest. And in a fury, she seized him by the hair and dragged him into the room. Marmeladov seconded her efforts by meekly crawling along on his knees. And this is a consolation to me. This does not hurt me, but is a positive consolation, honored sir. He called out, shaken to and fro by his hair, and even once striking the ground with his forehead. The child asleep on the floor woke up and began to cry. The boy in the corner, losing all control, began trembling and screaming, and rushed to his sister in violent terror, almost in a fit. The eldest girl was shaking like a leaf. He's drunk it! He's drunk it all! The poor woman screamed in despair. And his clothes are gone! And they're hungry! Hungry! And wringing her hands, she pointed to the children. Oh, accursed life! And you... Are you not ashamed? She pounced all at once upon Raskolnikov. From the tavern! Have you been drinking with him? You have been drinking with him, too! Go away! The young man was hastening away without uttering a word. The inner door was thrown wide open, and inquisitive faces were peering in at it. Coarse, laughing faces with pipes and cigarettes, and heads wearing caps thrust themselves in at the doorway. Further in could be seen figures in dressing gowns flung open and costumes of unseemly scantiness, some of them with cards in their hands. They were particularly diverted when Marmeladov, dragged about by his hair, shouted that it was a consolation to him. They even began to come into the room. At last, a sinister, shrill outcry was heard. This came from Amalia Lipveshel herself, pushing her way amongst them and trying to restore order after her own fashion, and for the 100th time to frighten the poor woman by ordering her with coarse abuse to clear out of the room the next day. As he went out, Raskolnikov had time to put his hand into his pocket, to snatch up the coppers he had received in exchange for his ruble in the tavern and to lay them unnoticed on the window. Afterwards, on the stairs, he changed his mind and would have gone back. What a stupid thing I've done, he thought to himself. They have Sonia and I want it myself. But reflecting that it would be impossible to take it back now and that in any case he would not have taken it, he dismissed it with a wave of his hand and went back to his lodging. Sonia wants pomatum too, he said as he walked along the street. And he laughed malignantly. Such smartness costs money. And maybe Sonia herself will be bankrupt today. For there is always a risk hunting big game, digging for gold. And then they would all be without a crust tomorrow except for my money. Hurrah for Sonia! What a mine they've dug there. And they're making the most of it. Yes, they are making the most of it. They've wept over it and are grown used to it. Man grows used to everything, the scoundrel. He sank into thought. And what if I'm wrong? He cried suddenly after a moment's thought. What if man is not really a scoundrel? Man in general, I mean. The whole race of mankind. Then all the rest is prejudice, simply artificial terrors. And there are no barriers. And it's all as it should be. And that's chapter 2, which means it's time to pull out the mirror dungeon, baby. We got an ad break coming up in 8 minutes, so when that happens, I'm going to go get up to use the restroom and come back to whatever I'm doing now. Yeah, we're gonna use the ring comp. I say without the fucking ring Rodion. I understand the irony, but you know what? I need my charge IDs more than I need Impasto. Hold on, do I got that? Do I got the sound clip? I think I do.
Impasto.
Yeah, that thing. What do you guys think of Crime and Punishment so far? I'm thinking Rodion's like, what the fuck, bro? As a POV character, he's kind of funny. I can already tell this is going to have a lot to say about the feelings of guilt. And possibly contrasting that to accountability. Or, you know, punishment. What do I want to take? This and... maybe I want to take a charge? Yes. That's probably worth it. Yeah, welcome to the part of my reading stream where I actually play a video game. So the setup goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Heathcliff, 8, 9, 10, 11. Really, if we get past the... If a backup unit comes up, that means we're in serious trouble.
닥쳐라, 배파. 누굴 팰지 내가 정한다.
저희에게도 이런 힘을 베풀어 주시다니 마음씨가 넓은 분이실까요? 아, 실수로 주셨더라도 상관없어요. 한 번 베푼 이상 낙장 불입이랍니다.
Oh, I'm checking something real quick. Oh, cool. That's interesting. I will talk about this at some later time. I just got something. I got something interesting. Alright, gameplay. Sorry, chat. A lot of interesting shit has been happening to me lately. I would not wish it upon my worst enemy, but such is life.
날카롭고 정확하게.
한 쌍의 상황을 보이고 24개의 늑골이 자아내는 티비아의 멜로디가
만복의 시간입니다.
재밌네. 난 너희가 좀 더 어설플 거라고 생각해. 예상한 것보다 움직임이 더 좋구나. 이제 싱스에서 벗어났나? 조
감상은 어떤가요?
욕심 모가지를 분주한
As about to start playing, I will be right back.
저 도야지 같은 새끼들.
And we're back. Did you miss me? I missed me. I miss when times were better. Unironically, though,
풀이 보이네.
this puts you, reading this kind of literature puts you in a kind of mood. It's not a happy one.
의도는 모르겠지만 이걸로 공평해졌네.
영감이 떠올랐다.
으타! 더 먹어치워라!
이제 한 쌍의 상황볼과 24개의 늑골이 자아내는 티비아의 멜로디가
옳다.
비뚤어졌구려.
I've been painstakingly working toward getting my affairs in order recently, and it's been difficult. I still haven't been able to find a job in the last 6 months. It's hard to imagine that it's even been half a year since I got fired. That's rough.
날
テキ
뛰어보라고.
ストこのまま進めましょう。
But things are gradually getting better.
発艦設置성공!
Gradually. I
오늘도
hope it would
정말 멋진
improve
활약이었어.
faster, though.
내일도 꼭 불러주기야. 세상이 평화로워지는 건 기쁜 거야. 근데 내일도 지금처럼 조용하려나?
I know it's preemptive to say it, but I think
대갚아보죠.
Crime and Punishment might not necessarily hit me as hard as the Metamorphosis did. The Metamorphosis cut deep. That shit fucking hurting, you know?
날카롭고 정확하게.
맛있는 맛이 있는 첫 여자를 시작했을 때보다
미술적인 세계에선 벗어났나?
감회가 새로워요.
그딴 컨디션으로 퍼 놈에게 덤빈다라. 데카당스식 예술이라도 보여줄 셈인가? 날카롭고 정확하게.
더 야세라는 소재를 통달한다면
착취감이라.
You know, just like the characters that are in this game, the literary sources that they're based off of are probably going to
재밌네. 난 너희가
affect me emotionally differently depending on the
성대한
구,
예술적
온, 올.
depending on which one it is.
슬슬 물리는군. 근처에
Because,
융수형
you know, the human experience is very subjective like that.
있군. 그럼 오늘 림컨버 회식 메뉴는 수박을 곁들인 용수형 과자로 결정하지.
Wow, that was really lucky RNG, actually.
에고 침식도 양.
Getting a cost boosting item this early is really nice.
일꾼들은 연료를 가득 채워오셨군요. 안심이 된다.
Lately, I feel like the internet has been trying to get me to, get really fucking mad. What do the kids call it? Rage bait? It's been trying to get me mad at issues that should be rather trivial, let's say.
날카롭고.
But I keep thinking, like, in response to that, of like, I'm pretty sure I got more than enough of my own problems to worry about.
먹어치워라.
무타 법을 이제 좀 이해했군. 누군가에겐 합해졌겠지만
このまま進めましょう
It's very hard to care about the world's problems when you're in a very bad way yourself.
날카롭고 정확하게.
다들 첫 여정을 시작했을 때보다 정말 잘해주셨네요. 비뚤어져
このまま行けば
매일
敵を
보아하는
食い止められます
지금 감회가 새로워요.
더 야성적인 깊이로.
매뉴얼을 만들어두길 잘했네. 그렇게만 해.
핵심적인 스프레드에
I'm not saying it's a bad thing to care about things when you're going through a rough time, but it's like,
지킬 게 많거든.
if you can't take care of yourself, you can't
하지만
really
슬슬
care
물리는
about other things, you know?
근처에
That's just what I
융수용하는
think.
군
It's
거를
kind of-
간 곳 있나? 이건. 그럼 오늘
It gets to the point where you
링컨버
can become more of a
회신님이
hindrance to the
수박을
people
터뜨린
you'd be
용수용
interested in
과자로
caring about.
결정하지.
And that's how we get a lot of self-important idiots who can't hold their own in a conversation. Anyway, that's one floor down, which means it's time to get back to reading. Oh, this is ominous as hell, actually. Hold on. Okay. The run is not over. The run is not over! Oh my god, we might be goated! Okay, now for real, we get back to reading. I'm gradually trying to fix my sleep schedule, so it might be a while before I can properly lock in. I might end the stream a little bit early, although I think the hard cutoff was going to be in like an hour and 15 minutes because there's maintenance. But I may have overcorrected in trying to adjust my sleep schedule last weekend. is what I'm saying. It's like, I'm gonna be getting sleepier within the next 30 minutes for sure. And it certainly doesn't help that I'm going to be reading. That's not an activity that's very conducive to keeping you awake, I think. At least not me. that shit's liable to make me fucking hong shoo me. I dread closing my eyes for the next hour. Right then. He waked up late next day after a broken sleep. But his sleep had not refreshed him. He waked up bilious, irritable, ill-tempered, and looked with hatred at his room. It was a tiny cupboard of a room, about 6 paces in length. It had a poverty-stricken appearance with its dusty yellow paper peeling off the walls, and it was so low-pitched that a man of more than average height was ill at ease in it and felt every moment that he would knock his head against the ceiling. You leave now? Thanks for stopping by. The furniture was in keeping with the room. There were 3 old chairs, rather rickety, a painted table in the corner on which lay a few manuscripts and books. The dust that lay thick upon them showed that they had been long untouched. A big, clumsy sofa occupied almost the whole of one wall and a half the floor space of the room. It was once covered with chintz, but was now in rags and served Raskolnikov as a bed. Often he went to sleep on it, as he was, without undressing, without sheets, wrapped in his old student's overcoat, with his head on one little pillow, under which he heaped up all the linen he had, clean and dirty, by way of a bolster. A little table stood out in front of the sofa. It would have been difficult to sink to a lower ebb of disorder. My ability to stay awake is definitely not up to par. Oh, don't you worry, mine is pretty bad too. I'm like in a fight for desperation right now. Have amazing? You too. Little table stood in front of the sofa. It would have been difficult to sink to a lower ebb of disorder, but to Raskolnikov, in his present state of mind, this was positively agreeable. He had got completely away from everyone, like a tortoise in its shell, and even the sight of the servant girl who had to wait upon him and look sometimes into his room made him writhe with nervous irritation. He was in the condition that overtakes some monomaniacs entirely concentrated upon one thing. His landlady had, for the last fortnight, given up sending him meals, and he had not yet thought of expostulating with her, though he went without his dinner. Nastasha, the cook and only servant, was rather pleased at the lodger's mood and had entirely given up sweeping and doing his room. Only once a week or so she would stray into his room with a broom. She waked him up that day. "Get up! Why are you asleep?" she called to him. "It's past 9. I have brought you some tea. Would you have a cup? I should think you're fairly starving." Raskolnikov opened up his eyes, started, and recognized Nastasha. "From the landlady, eh?" he asked slowly and with a sickly face, sitting up on the sofa. "From the landlady, indeed." She set before him her own cracked teapot full of weak and stale tea, and laid 2 yellow clumps of sugar by the side of it. "Here, Nastasha, take it, please," he said, fumbling in his pocket, for he had slept in his clothes, and taking out a handful of coppers. "Run and buy me a loaf. Get me a little sausage, the cheapest at the pork butcher's." "The loaf I'll fetch you this very minute. But wouldn't you rather have some cabbage soup instead of sausage?" "It's capital soup. Yesterday's." "Oh. Okay. I thought I blew up my microphone for a second. "I saved it for you yesterday, but you came in late. It's fine soup." When the soup had been brought, he had begun upon it. Nastasia sat down beside him on the sofa and began chatting. She was a country peasant woman, and a very talkative one. Praskovia Pavlovna means to complain to the police about you, she said. He scowled. To the police? What does she want? You don't pay her money and you won't turn out of the room. That's what she wants, to be sure. The devil. That's the last straw, he muttered, grinding his teeth. No, that would not suit me. Just now. She's a fool, he added aloud. I'll go and talk to her today. Fool she is, and no mistake, just as I am. But why, if you are so clever, do you lie here like a sack and have nothing to show for it? One time you used to go out, you say, to teach children. But why is it you do nothing now? I am doing... Raskolnikov began suddenly and reluctantly. Son, the fuck is this paragraph? The fucking type... The fucking font size. Hold on, I gotta screenshot this. Okay, glancing at it, I suppose the text being smaller makes sense contextually because it's a written letter, but my fucking god. Alright, where were we? What are you doing? Work? What sort of work? I am thinking, he answered seriously after a pause. Nastasia was overcome with a fit of laughter. She was given to laughter, and when anything amused her, she laughed inaudibly, quivering and shaking all over shaking all over till she felt ill. And have you made much money by your thinking? She managed to articulate at last. One can't go out to give lessons without boots, and I'm sick of it. Don't quarrel with your bread and butter. They pay so little for lessons. What's the use of a few coppers? He answered reluctantly, as if replying to his own thought. And you want to get a fortune all at once? He looked at her strangely. Yes, I want a fortune, he answered firmly, after a brief pause. Don't be in such a hurry. You quite frightened me. Shall I get the loaf or not? As you please. Ah, I forgot. A letter came for you yesterday when you were out. A letter? For me? From whom? I can't say. I gave 3 kopecks of my own to the postman for it. Will you pay me back? Then bring it to me, for God's sake. Bring it! Cried Raskolnikov, greatly excited. Good God! A minute later, the letter was brought him. That was it. From his mother, from the province of... He turned pale when he took it. It was a long while since he had received a letter, but another feeling also suddenly stabbed his heart. Nastasia, leave me alone for goodness' sake. Here are your 3 kopecks, but for goodness sake, make haste and go. The letter was quivering in his hand. He did not want to open it in her presence. He wanted to be left alone with the letter. When Astasia had gone out, he lifted it quickly to his lips and kissed it. Then he gazed intently at the address, the small, sloping handwriting, so dear and familiar, of the mother who had once taught him to read and write. He delayed. He seemed almost afraid of something. At last he opened it. It was a thick, heavy letter, weighing over 2 ounces. 2 large sheets of notepaper were covered with very small handwriting. That first exchange of what sort of work I'm thinking, and then her laughing is like... He's literally me when I talk to a woman. Alright, time to read this damn fucking letter. Let's go. My dear Rhodia, wrote his mother, it's 2 months since I last had a talk with you by letter, which has distressed me and even kept me awake at night thinking. But I am sure you will not blame me for my inevitable silence. You know how I love you. You are all we have to look to, Donya and I. You are our all, our one hope, our one stay. What a grief it was to me when I heard that you had given up the university some months ago, for want of means to keep yourself, and that you had lost your lessons and your other work. How could I help you? Out of my 120 rubles a year pension. The 15 rubles I sent you 4 months ago I borrowed, as you know, on security of my pension, from Vasily Ivanovich Varushin, a merchant of this town. He is a kind-hearted man and was a friend of your father's too. But having given him the right to receive the pension, I had to wait till the debt was paid off, and that is only just done, so that I've been unable to send you anything all this time. But now, thank God, I believe I shall be able to send you something more, and in fact, we may congratulate ourselves on our good fortune now, of which I hasten to inform you. In the first place, would you have guessed, dear Rhodia, that your sister has been living with me for the last 6 weeks and we shall not be separated in the future? Thank God her sufferings are over. But I will tell you everything in order so that you may know just how everything has happened and all we have hitherto concealed from you. When you wrote to me 2 months ago that you had heard that Donia had a great deal to put up with in Svidrigalov's house, when you wrote that and asked me to tell you all about it, what could I write in answer to you? If I had written the whole truth to you, I dare say you would have thrown up everything and have come to us, even if you had to walk all the way, for I know your character and your feelings, and you would not let your sister be insulted. I was in despair myself. But what could I do? And besides, I did not know the whole truth myself then. What made it all so difficult was that Donia received 100 rubles in advance when she took place as governess in their family, and on condition of part of her salary being deducted every month, and so it was impossible to throw up the situation without repaying the debt. This sum, now I can explain it all to you, my precious Rhodia, she took chiefly in order to send you 60 rubles, which you needed so terribly, and which you received from us last year. We deceived you then, writing that this money came from Donia's savings, but that was not so. And now I tell you all about it because, thank God, God, things have suddenly changed for the better, and now, and that you may know how Donia loves you and what a heart she has. At first, indeed, Mr. Svidrigailov treated her very rudely and used to make her disrespectful and jeering remarks at table. But I don't want to go into all those painful details so as not to worry you for nothing when it is now all over. In short, in spite of the kind and generous behavior of Maria Petrovna, Mr. Svidrigailov, his wife, and all the rest of the household, Donia had a very hard time, especially when Mr. Svidrigailov, relapsing into his old regimental habits, was under the influence of Bacchus. And how do you think it was all explained later on? Would you believe that the crazy fellow had conceived a passion for Donia from the beginning, but had concealed it under a show of rudeness and contempt? Possibly he was ashamed and horrified himself at his own flighty hopes, considering his years and his being the father of a family. And that made him angry with Donia, and possibly, too, he hoped by his rude and sneering behavior to hide the truth from others. But at last he lost all control and had the face to make Donia an open and shameful proposal, promising her all sorts of inducements and offering, besides, to throw up everything and take her to another estate of his, or even abroad. You can imagine all she went through. To leave her situation at once was impossible, not only on account of the money debt, but also to spare the feelings of Maria Petrovna, whose suspicions would have been aroused. And then Donia would have been the cause of a rupture in the family, and it would have meant a terrible scandal for Donia too. That would have been inevitable. There were various other reasons owing to which Donia could not hope to escape from that awful house for another 6 weeks. You know Donia, of course. You know how clever she is and what a strong will she has. Donia can endure a great deal, and even in the most difficult cases she has the fortitude to maintain her firmness. She did not even write to me about everything for fear of upsetting me, although we were constantly in communication. It all ended very unexpectedly. Maria Petrovna accidentally overheard her husband imploring Donia in the garden and, putting quite a wrong interpretation of the position, threw the blame upon her, believing her to be the cause of it all. An awful scene took place between them on the spot in the garden. Maria Petrovna went so far as to strike Donia, refused to hear anything, and was shouting at her for a whole hour, and then gave orders that Donia should be packed off at once to me in a plain peasant's cart, into which they flung all her things, her linen and her clothes, all pell-mell, without folding it up and packing it. And a heavy shower of rain came on too, and Donia, insulted and put to shame, had to drive with a peasant in an open cart all the 17 verses into town. Only think now, what answer could I have sent to the letter I received from you 2 months ago, and what could I have written? I was in despair. I dared not write to you the truth because you would have been very unhappy, mortified, and indignant. And yet what could you do? You could only perhaps ruin yourself, and besides, Donia would not allow it. And fill up my letter with trifles when my heart was so full of sorrow, I could not. For a whole month the town was full of sorrow about this scandal, and it came to such a pass that Donia and I dared not even to go to church on account of the contemptuous looks, whispers, and even remarks made aloud about us. All our acquaintances avoided us. Nobody even bowed to us in the street, and I learned that some shopmen and clerks were intending to insult us in a shameful way, smearing the gates of our house with pitch, so that the landlord began to tell us we must leave. All this was set going by Maria Petrovna, who managed to slander Donia and throw dirt at her in every family. She knows everyone in the neighborhood, and that month she was continually coming into the town, and as she is rather talkative and fond of gossiping about her family affairs, and particularly of complaining to all and each of her husband, which is not at all right. So in a short time she has spread her story not only in the town, but over the whole surrounding district. It made me ill, but Donia bore it better than I did. And if only you could have seen how she endured it all and tried to comfort me and cheer me up. She is an angel. But by God's mercy, our sufferings were cut short. Mr. Svidrigailov returned to his senses and repented, and, probably feeling sorry for Donia, he laid before Maria Petrovna complete and unmistakable proof of Donia's innocence, in the form of a letter Donia had been forced to write and give to him, before Maria Petrovna came upon them in the garden. This letter, which remained in Mr. Svidrigailov's hands after departure, she had written to refuse personal explanations and secret interviews, for which he was entreating her. In that letter she reproached him with great heat and indignation for the baseness of his behavior in regard to Maria Petrovna, reminding him that he was the father and head of a family, and telling him how infamous it was of him to torment and make unhappy a defenseless girl, unhappy enough already. Indeed, dear Rhodia, the letter was so nobly and touchingly written that I sobbed when I read it, and to this day I cannot read it without tears. Moreover, the evidence of the servants, too, cleared Donia's reputation. They had seen and known a great deal more than Mr. Svidrigailov himself supposed, as indeed is always the case with servants. Maria Petrovna was completely taken aback, and again crushed, as she herself said to us, but she was completely convinced of Donia's innocence. The very next day, being Sunday, she went straight to the cathedral, knelt down and prayed with tears to Our Lady to give her strength to bear this new trial and to do her duty. Then she came straight from the cathedral to us, told the whole story, wept bitterly, and, fully penitent, she embraced Donia and besought her to forgive her. The same morning, without any delay, she went round to all the houses in the town and everywhere, shedding tears. She asserted in the most flattering terms Donia's innocence and the nobility of her feelings and her behavior. What was more, she showed and read to everyone the letter in Donia's own handwriting to Mr. Svidrigailov, and even allowed them to take copies of it. Holy shit, this is a yap. Sorry, I'm telling you, I am fighting the sleep, not because the book is boring, it's not in the least, but because my sleep schedule was just that fucked. He even allowed them to take copies of it, which I must say I think was superfluous. In this way she was busy for several days in driving about the whole town, because some people had taken offense to precedence having been given to others, and therefore they had to take turns so that in every house she was expected before she arrived, and everyone knew that on such and such a day Maria Petrovna would be reading the letter in such and such a place, and people assembled for every reading of it, even many who had heard it several times already in both their own houses and in other people's. In my opinion, a very great deal of all this was unnecessary, but that's Maria Petrovna's character. Anyway, she succeeded in completely reestablishing Donia's reputation, and the whole ignominy of this affair rested it as an indelible disgrace upon her husband, as the only person to blame, so that I really began to feel sorry for him. It was really treating the crazy fellow too harshly. Donia was at once asked to give lessons in several families, but she refused. All of a sudden, everyone began to treat her with marked respect, and all of this did much to bring about the event by which, one may say, our... Fuck, I lost the word because I scrolled down. Our whole fortunes are now transformed. You must know, dear Rhodia, that Donia has a suitor and that she has already consented to marry him. I hasten to tell you all about the matter, and though it has been arranged without asking your counsel, I think you will not be aggrieved with me or with your sister on that account, for you will see that we could not wait and put off our decision till we heard from you. And you could not have judged all the facts without being on the spot. This was how it happened. He is already of the rank of a counselor, Pyotr Petrovich Lushin. And is distantly related to Maria Petrovna, who has been very active in bringing the match about. It began with his expressing through her his desire to make our acquaintance. He was properly received, drank coffee with us, and the very next day he sent us a letter in which he very courteously made an offer and begged for a speedy and decided answer. He is a very busy man and is in a great hurry to get to Petersburg, so that every moment is precious to him. At first, of course, we were greatly surprised as that it all happened so quickly and unexpectedly. We thought and talked it over the whole day. He is a well-to-do man to be depended upon, and he has 2 posts in the government and has already made his fortune. It is true that he is 45 years old, but he is of fairly prepossessing appearance, and might still be thought attractive by women, and he is altogether a very respectable and presentable man. Only he seems a little morose and somewhat conceited, but possibly that may only be the impression he makes at first sight. And beware, dear Rhodia, when he comes to Petersburg, as he shortly will do, beware of judging him too hastily and severely, as your way is, if there is anything you do not like in him at first sight. I give you this warning, although I feel sure he will make a favorable impression upon you. Moreover, in order to understand any man, one must be deliberate and careful to avoid forming prejudices and mistaken ideas, which are very difficult to correct and get over afterwards. And Pyotr Petrovich, judging by many indications, is a thoroughly estimable man. Estimable man, excuse me. At his first visit, indeed, he told us that he was a practical man, but still he shares, as he expressed it, that many of the convictions of our most rising generation, and he is an opponent of all prejudices. He said a good deal more, for he seems a little conceited and likes to be listened to, but this is scarcely a vice. I, of course, understood very little of it, but Donia explained to me that, though he is not a man of great education, he is clever, and seems to be good-natured. You know your sister's character, Rhodia. She is a resolute, sensible, patient, and generous girl. But she has a passionate heart, as I know very well. Of course, there is no great love either on his side or on hers, but Donia is a clever girl, and has the heart of an angel, and will make it her duty to make her husband happy, who on his side will make her happiness his care. Of that we have no good reason for doubt, though it must be admitted that the matter had been arranged in great haste. Besides, he is a man of great prudence, and he will see, to be sure of himself, that his own happiness will be the more secure the happier Donia is with him. And as for some defects of character, for some habits, and even certain differences of opinions, which indeed are inevitable even in the happiest marriages, Donia has said that, as regards all that, she relies on herself, that there is nothing to be uneasy about, and she is ready to put up with a great deal, if only their future relationship can be an honorable and straightforward one. He struck me, for instance, at first as rather abrupt, but that may well come from his being an outspoken man, and that is no doubt how it is. For instance, at his second visit, after he had received Donia's consent, in the course of conversation, he declared that before making Donia's acquaintance, he had made up his mind to marry a girl of good reputation, without dowry and, above all, one who experienced poverty because, as he explained, a man ought not to be indebted to his wife, but that it is better for a wife to look upon her husband as her benefactor. I must add that he expressed it more nicely and politely than I have done, for I have forgotten his actual phrases and only remember the meaning. And besides, it was obviously not said out of design, but slipped out in the heat of conversation, so that he tried afterwards to correct himself and smooth it over. But all the same, it did strike me as somewhat rude, so I said so afterwards to Donia. But Donia was vexed, and answered that words are not deeds, and that, of course, is perfectly true. Donia did not sleep all night before she made up her mind, and thinking I was asleep, she got out of bed and was walking up and down the room all night. At last she knelt down before the icon and prayed long and fervently, and in the morning she told me that she had decided. I have mentioned already that Pyotr Petrovich is just setting off for Petersburg, where he has a great deal of business, and he wants to open a legal bureau. He has been occupied for many years in conducting civil and commercial litigation, and only the other day he won an important case. He has to be in Petersburg because he has an important case before the Senate. So, Rhodia dear, he may be of greatest use to you, in every way indeed. And Donia and I have agreed from this very day that you could definitely enter upon your career and might consider that your future is marked out and assured for you. Yeah. I'm feeling that sleepy, but also I got distracted because I saw the stupid fucking Cybertruck that sank in the fucking lake today. I'll tell you guys about that in private if it matters. I got a private story about that one. I can't mention it on stream, I think. I shouldn't. Oh, if only this comes to pass. This would be such a benefit that we could only look upon it as a providential blessing. Donia is dreaming of nothing else. We have even ventured already to drop a few words on the subject of Pyotr Petrovich. He was cautious in his answer, and said that, of course, as he could not get on without a secretary, it would be better to be paying a salary to a relation than a stranger, if only the former were fitted for the duties, as though there could be doubt of your being fitted. But then he expressed doubts whether your studies at the university would leave you time for work at his office. The matter dropped for the time, but Donia is thinking of nothing else now. She has been in a sort of fever for the last few days, and has already made a regular plan for your becoming in the end an associate, and even a partner in Pyotr Petrovich's legal business. Which might well be, seeing that you are a student of the law. I am in complete agreement with her, Rhodia, and share all her plans and hopes, and think there is every probability of realizing them. And in spite of Pyotr Petrovich's evasiveness, very natural at present, since he does not know you, Donia is firmly persuaded that she will gain everything by her good influence over her future husband. This she is reckoning upon. Of course, we are careful not to talk of any of these more remote plans to Pyotr Petrovich, especially if you're becoming his partner. He is a practical man and might take this very coldly. It might all seem to him simply a daydream. Nor has either Donia or I breathed a word to him of the great hopes we have of his helping us to pay for your university studies. We have not spoken of it in the first place because it will come to pass of itself later on, and he will no doubt without wasting words offer to do it of himself, as though he could refuse Donia that. The more readily since you may be by your own efforts become his right hand in the office and receive this assistance not as a charity, but as a salary earned by your own work. Donia wants to arrange it all like this, and I quite agree with her. And we have not spoken of our plans for another reason, that is, because I particularly wanted you to feel on an equal footing when you first met him. When Donia spoke to him with enthusiasm about you, he answered that one could never judge of a man without seeing him close or for oneself, that he looked forward to forming his own opinion when he makes your acquaintance. Do you know, my precious Rhodia, I think perhaps for some reasons, nothing to do with Pyotr Petrovich though, simply from my own personal, perhaps old womanish fancies, I should do better to go on living by myself, apart than with them after the wedding. I am convinced that he will be generous and delicate enough to invite me and to urge me to remain with my daughter for the future. And if he said nothing about it hitherto, it is simply because he had been taken for granted. But I shall refuse. Because it has been taken for granted, but I shall refuse. I have noticed more than once in my life that husbands don't quite get on with their mothers-in-law, and I don't want to be the least bit in anyone's way. And for my own sake, too, would rather be quite independent so long as I have a crust of bread of my own, and such children as you and Donia. If possible, I would settle somewhere near you for the most joyful piece of news, dear Rhodia, I have kept for the end of my letter. Know then, my dear... How long is this fucking letter? Like, how much were they able to write on a piece of paper? Is it just one piece of paper? Whatever. Know then, my dear boy, that we may perhaps be all together in a very short time and may embrace one another again after a separation of almost 3 years. It is settled for certain that Donia and I are to set off for Petersburg. Exactly when, I don't know, but very, very soon. Possibly in a week. It all depends on Pyotr Petrovich, who will let us know when he has had time to look around him in Petersburg. To suit his own arrangements, he is anxious to have the ceremony as soon as possible, even before the Fast of Our Lady, if it could be managed, or if that is too soon to be ready, immediately after. Oh, with what happiness I shall press you to my heart. Donia is all excitement at the joyful thought of seeing you. She said one day in joke that she would be ready to marry Pyotr Petrovich for that alone. She is an angel. She is not writing anything to you now, and has only told me to write that she has so much to tell you that she is not going to take up her pen now. For a few lines would tell you nothing, and it would only mean upsetting herself. She bids me send you her love and innumerable kisses. But although we shall be meeting so soon, perhaps I shall send you as much money as I can in a day or two. Now that everyone has heard that Donia is to marry Pyotr Petrovich, my credit has suddenly improved, and I know that Afanasy Ivanovich will trust me now to even to 75 rubles on the security of my pension, so that perhaps I shall be able to send you 25 or even 30 rubles. I would send you more, but I am uneasy about our traveling expenses. For though Pyotr Petrovich has been so kind as to undertake part of the expenses of the journey, that is to say, he has taken upon himself the conveyance of our bags and big trunk, which will be conveyed through some acquaintances of him. We must reckon upon some expense on our arrival in Petersburg, where we can't be left without a halfpenny, at least for the first few days. But we have calculated it all, Donia and I, to the last penny, and we shall see that the journey will not cost very much. Or we see that the journey will not cost very much. It is only 90 versts from us to the railway, and we have come to an agreement with the driver we know, so as to be in readiness. And from there, Donia and I could travel quite comfortably third class. So that I may very likely be able to send you not 25, but 30 rubles. But enough. I have covered 2 sheets already and there is no space left for more. Our whole history, which so many events have happened. And now, my precious Rhodia, I embrace you and send you a mother's blessing till we meet. Love Donia, your sister, Rhodia. Love her as she loves you and understand that she loves you beyond everything, more than herself. She is an angel, and you, Rhodia, you are everything to us. Our one hope, our one consolation. If only you are happy, we shall be happy. Do you still say your prayers, Rhodia, and believe in the mercy of our Creator and our Redeemer? I am afraid in my heart that you may have been visited by the new spirit of infidelity that is abroad today. If it is so, I pray for you. Remember, dear boy, how in your childhood, when your father was living, you used to lisp your prayers at my knee, and how happy we all were in those days. Goodbye, till we meet then. I embrace you warmly, and with many kisses. Yours till death, Pulcheria Raskolnikov. Almost from the first, while he read the letter, Raskolnikov's face was wet with tears. When he finished it, his face was pale and distorted, and a bitter, wrathful, and malignant smile was on his lips. He laid his head down on his threadbare, dirty pillow and pondered a long time. His heart was beating violently, and his brain was in a turmoil. At last he felt cramped and stifled in the little yellow room that was like a cupboard or a box. His eyes and his mind craved for space. He took up his hat and went out, this time without dread of meeting anyone. He had forgotten his dread. He turned in the direction of the Vasilyevsky Ostrov, walking along the Vasilyevsky Prospect, as though hastening on some business, but he walked, as his habit was, without noticing his way, muttering and even speaking aloud to himself, to the astonishment of passers-by. Many of them took him to be drunk. Whew. I think what we're going to do is we're going to finish this floor. We're not going to read chapter 4. We're going to end the stream after that. Because I'm feeling the EP.
교류회. 설레네요.
That chapter, how do I feel about it? Taking it at face value, it feels like it was mostly just set up, but that isn't strictly true. There's a lot to be gleaned from his sister's situation.
감상은 어떤가요? 합격장.
I feel it sets up the stakes of status and the world in which the book takes place, which is evidently just 1800s Russia.
고 악한 아르카나들을 뒤흔들었어. 그러면 승리도 시간 문제겠지?
감상은 어떤가요?
차포잡이라. 예상한 것보다 움직임이 더 좋아.
훌륭한 단말만.
지킬 게 많거든.
That's how I talk in real life. You're actually listening to me through a filter.
이거 참 설레는구려.
The transcripts of my speech look like a fucking
도시에선
itemized
저런 형태로 사람을
receipt for a
강화하기도
hospital
하나 봐.
bill.
써봐주.
재밌네. 난 너희가 좀
당신을
더 어설플
소재로
거라고
써보고
생각했거든. 차포잡이라. 예상한 것보다 움직임이 더 좋구나.
이제야 완성되었나?
이제 싱수에서 벗어났나?
エリートオペレーターの身の腕前です。
Maintenance is gonna hit in 30 minutes, so we're just gonna go for clearing this floor, and then we're done, I think. Oh. Well, that's convenient. Alright, time to kill Bongi.
사랑과 정의 이름으로 지금 이곳에 등장!
하지만 그래봤자 거다. 대가리 딱 떼고.
Go, my ring son. Go again, my ring son.
다들 첫 여정을 시작했을 때보다 정말 강해지셨네요.
으타!
매일 보아.
먹어치워라!
아, 여기선 이런 공격이 잘 먹히는군요.
차포잡이라. 예상한 것보다 움직임이 더 좋구나.
파우스트, 신체파의 예술을 보여줄 시간이랍니다.
Here with the big nasty Faust.
敵に対して大きな打撃を与えました。
Die from bleed, motherfucker.
자, 악당 퇴치
Got his
성공!
ass.
오늘도 정말 멋진 활약이었어. 내일도 꼭 불러주기야. 세상이 평화로워지는 건 기쁜 거야. 근데 내일도 지금처럼 조용하려나?
Alright, everyone. I'm starting to feel a little eepy. I don't think I can continue with reading. But yeah, tomorrow we will be back with Crash Bandicoot, and I'm going to fucking scream. And then on Friday, Mass Effect! So please look forward to that. Take care of yourselves, everyone. Have a pleasant evening, afternoon, morning, whatever time it is, wherever you are, and I am probably going to take a nap before I go out for a walk. Bye!